I retired and bought a beach house to finally rest. Then my son called. "Stay in the tool shed. I'm bringing my wife and 17 relatives. If you don't like it, move back to the city." I didn't say a word, but when they arrived, they found a surprise. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought retirement would feel like this. After 43 years as a registered nurse, watching over patients through their darkest hours, holding hands with families as they said goodbye, I thought I'd earned something beautiful, something peaceful, something that was finally, completely mine. The beach house in Ocean View was everything I'd dreamed of during those long night shifts. White clapboard siding, blue shutters that reminded me of my grandmother's eyes, and windows that faced the Atlantic Ocean. I'd saved every penny I could for 15 years, skipping vacations, driving my old Honda until it practically fell apart, all so I could have this one perfect thing. The day I signed the papers, I cried right there in the real estate office. $285,000, my entire life savings plus my pension buyout. The agent, a sweet young woman named Sarah, handed me tissues and said she'd never seen someone so happy to buy a house. I told her it wasn't just a house, it was my freedom. For 3 months, I lived in paradise. I'd wake up to the sound of waves, make my coffee in the little kitchen with its cheerful yellow curtains, and sit on the wraparound porch watching pelicans dive for fish. I planted roses along the picket fence, bought a swing for the oak tree in the backyard, and even adopted a stray cat I named Whiskers, who showed up the second week. I thought about calling Randall to share my happiness, but something always held me back. My son had been distant since he married Nova 3 years ago. Not mean exactly, but different. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became excuses. Holiday invitations came with conditions that somehow never worked out. But I pushed those thoughts away. This was my time, my house, my new chapter. Then came that Thursday morning in September. The phone rang while I was watering my roses, and I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't. "Mom!" Randall's voice was flat, businesslike, not the warm tone I remembered from when he was younger. "Randall, what a nice surprise. How are you, honey? How's Nova? And the kids?" There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause that made my stomach clench. "Listen, Mom, we need to talk about your situation there." "My situation?" I set down the watering can, my hand suddenly shaking. "What do you mean?" "The beach house thing. It's nice that you're having your little vacation, but it's time to be realistic about family responsibilities. Little vacation." The words hit me like a slap. This wasn't a vacation. This was my home, my life, my dream finally realized. "Randall, I don't understand what you're—" "Nova's family is having their annual reunion next month. 17 people. They need a place to stay, and frankly, it's ridiculous that you're rattling around in that big house all by yourself when you could be useful." Useful. My throat went dry. "You want me to host Nova's family reunion?" "Not host. They don't need you hovering around playing hostess. There's a tool shed or something in the back, right? You can stay there. Give the family the main house where they can actually relax and enjoy themselves." The world tilted. I had to grip the porch railing to steady myself. "You want me to move into the tool shed of my own house? It's not really a tool shed, is it? I mean, it's got electricity and everything. Nova looked it up on the real estate listing. It'll be fine for a week or two, maybe longer, depending on how things go. Maybe longer." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. "And if I say no?" Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Then maybe it's time you moved back to the city where you belong. This whole beach house thing." "Mom, you're 62 years old. You should be thinking about assisted living, not playing house by the ocean." Assisted living. I was 62, not 92. I ran marathons. I volunteered at the animal shelter. I was healthier than most people half my age. "Randall, this is my home. I bought it with my own money. Yeah, about that. Nova and I have been talking, and we're concerned about your finances. You spent everything on this place, didn't you? That's not very responsible. What happens when you need long-term care? When you get sick? You're going to expect us to take care of you, right?" The accusation hung in the air like poison. After everything I'd done for him, everything I'd sacrificed, he was suggesting I was a burden, a selfish burden. I have insurance, Randall, and savings. I'm not. Look, we'll discuss this when we get there. Nova's already made the arrangements. Her family's driving down from Virginia next weekend. I'm sure once you meet them, you'll see how nice it'll be to have a full house again. You always said you missed having people around. I had said that. During those lonely years after his father left, when it was just Randall and me against the world, when I'd have given anything for a house full of laughter and voices. But that was different. That was my choice, my family, my life. This was exile. I need to think about this, Randall. There's nothing to think about, Mom. They're coming. Nova's already sent out the invitations. Her whole family is taking time off work. You wouldn't want to disappoint them, would you? The trap was perfect. Say no, and I was the selfish old woman who ruined a family reunion. Say yes, and I was giving up everything I'd worked for my entire life. I'll call you back, I whispered. Don't take too long. Nova needs to know about sleeping arrangements. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, staring out at my roses, my ocean view, my beautiful little slice of heaven that had just become a battleground. Whiskers rubbed against my legs, purring. I picked him up and buried my face in his fur, trying not to let the tears fall. 43 years of healing others, of being strong, of putting everyone else first. And this was what I got. But something else stirred in my chest along with the hurt. Something harder. Something that had kept me going through medical school as a single mother, through double shifts when Randall was sick, through every challenge life had thrown at me. I wasn't going down without a fight, and if my own son thought he could manipulate me out of my own home, well, he was about to learn that his mother was stronger than he remembered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, hearing that cold stranger's voice where my son's warmth used to be. So I did what I always did when my mind wouldn't quiet. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and pulled out the photo albums. The pictures told a different story. There was 3-year-old Randall on Christmas morning, gap-toothed and giggling as he hugged the teddy bear I'd worked overtime for 2 months to afford. 7-year-old Randall in his Little League uniform, beaming as I cheered from the stands. The only parent who never missed a game. 16-year-old Randall at his high school graduation, tears in his eyes as he thanked me in his valedictorian speech for being everything a kid could ask for. When had it all changed? I knew the answer, even though I'd been trying not to think about it for 3 years. Nova. I met her at Randall's 30th birthday party, and my first thought was how perfectly put together she looked. Designer dress, flawless makeup, manicured nails that had never scrubbed floors or changed bedpans. She was beautiful in that polished way that money buys, and she looked at my simple sundress and sensible shoes like I was something that had wandered in from the garden. You must be Randall's mother, she'd said, extending one of those perfect hands. I'm Nova. I've heard so much about you. The way she said it made me wonder what exactly she'd heard, and from whom. Randall had been dating her for 6 months, but this was the first time he'd brought her around. Looking back, I should have questioned that. Randall had always shared everything with me. His dreams, his fears, his girlfriends. We'd been a team for so long, just the two of us against the world after his father abandoned us when Randall was 8. But Nova changed all that. The first sign was subtle. Randall started canceling our weekly dinners. Nova thinks I should be more independent, he explained when I asked. She says it's not healthy for a grown man to have dinner with his mother every week. Then came the holidays. We'd always spent Christmas Eve together, just us, looking through old photos and eating the gingerbread cookies we'd made together since he was 6. But Nova wanted to start their own traditions. It's important for couples to create their own family customs, Randall explained, parroting words that didn't sound like his own. The wedding was small, immediate family only. Nova's family, anyway. Mine was limited to me, sitting alone in the front pew while Nova's relatives filled 3/4 of the church. During the reception, I watched her work the room like a politician, all smiles and air kisses, while Randall followed behind her like a well-trained puppy. I tried to make conversation with her family, but they seemed to know something I didn't. When I mentioned how proud I was of Randall's promotion at the engineering firm, Nova's mother, Patricia, had given me a pitying look. "Oh, honey," she'd said. "Nova's already got him lined up for something much better. My brother's construction company is expanding. Family business, you know. Much more stable than working for strangers." I didn't know. Randall hadn't mentioned any job changes. We used to talk about everything. After the wedding, the distance grew worse. Phone calls became texts, became silence. When I did hear from Randall, Nova was always in the background, correcting him or adding her own commentary. "Mom thinks we should come visit more often," he'd say. "Your mother needs to understand that we have our own lives now," Nova would call out. "She can't expect you to come running every time she's lonely." Lonely, as if wanting to see my son made me pathetic. The final straw came last Christmas. I'd invited them over for dinner, promising to make Randall's favorite, pot roast with those little potatoes he'd loved since he was small. Nova declined for both of them. "We're starting a new tradition," she explained when I called to ask why. "Christmas should be about the nuclear family. Patricia agrees that too many extended family obligations can strain a marriage." Extended family. I was extended family now. But here's what really broke my heart. Randall went along with it, every time. He nodded and agreed and distanced himself further, until I was just another obligation to be managed. I'd tried to talk to him about it once, gently suggesting that Nova seemed to want to separate him from his old life. His response chilled me. "Nova just wants what's best for our family, Mom. She says you never learned healthy boundaries because Dad left and you became too dependent on me. She's helping me see that." Dependent. After raising him alone, working double shifts to pay for his college, cheering him through every triumph and heartbreak, I was the dependent one. That's when I stopped trying so hard. If Nova wanted Randall to choose between us, I wouldn't force him to make that choice. I stepped back, filled my life with other things, and tried to build a new relationship with my son based on whatever scraps Nova was willing to allow. Now, sitting in my beautiful beach house with Whiskers purring on my lap, I understood what had been happening all along. Nova hadn't just wanted Randall to herself. She'd been systematically erasing me from his life, rewriting our history, making me the villain in a story where I'd only ever tried to love my son. And tomorrow's phone call hadn't been about a family reunion. It had been the final move in a 3-year campaign to push me out entirely. My phone buzzed with a text message. Nova's number. "Hi, Doreen. So excited about the reunion. Just wanted to confirm, you'll be staying in the guest cottage, right? We want to make sure the main house is available for Patricia and the relatives with mobility issues. Thanks for being so understanding. XOXO. Guest cottage." She was already reframing it, making the tool shed sound like a deliberate choice instead of an exile. I stared at that message for a long time, thinking about all the ways I could respond, all the arguments I could make, all the hurt I could express, all the ways I could beg for basic respect in my own home. Instead, I typed back, "Of course, looking forward to meeting everyone." Let her think she'd won. Let her bring her entire family to witness my humiliation. Because Nova had made one crucial mistake. She didn't know who she was dealing with. She saw an old woman, easily dismissed and pushed aside. She saw someone who would quietly accept whatever scraps were thrown her way. She had no idea she was dealing with someone who had survived medical school as a single mother, who had worked her way up from floor nurse to charge nurse to supervisor through sheer determination, who had faced down angry doctors and grieving families and bureaucratic nightmares for 4 decades. Nova wanted to play games with my family, my home, my life. Game on. The next morning, I decided to clean out the tool shed. If I was going to be forced to stay there, at least I could make it bearable. The building was larger than Nova thought. It had been converted by the previous owners into a small workshop with a bathroom and even a little kitchenette. But it was filled with leftover furniture and boxes from the estate sale. I was moving a dusty armoire when I saw it, a manila folder that had fallen behind the furniture, probably dropped during the move. I picked it up, thinking it might be old warranty information or instruction manuals. But when I opened it, my blood ran cold. Real estate listings. Not for houses in Virginia where Nova's family lived, but for properties right here in Ocean View. Expensive properties. Beachfront condos starting at $400,000. Luxury homes in gated communities. And written in Nova's distinctive handwriting across the top of one listing, perfect for our new start. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. There were notes everywhere, calculations, financing options. But what made my stomach lurch was a printout from a mortgage calculator showing monthly payments for a $600,000 home, with my address listed as current property value for trade sale consideration. This wasn't about a family reunion. This was about stealing my house. I sank onto an old paint bucket, the papers scattered around me like evidence of a crime. Everything started making horrible sense. The phone call about me being irresponsible with my finances. The suggestion that I needed assisted living. The casual mention that maybe I should move back to the city. They weren't planning to visit. They were planning to stay. My phone rang, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Randall's number. "Hi, honey," I managed, my voice somehow steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "Hey, Mom. Listen, I've been thinking about what we discussed yesterday, and I want you to know this is really for the best. Nova's been doing some research on elder care, and she found some really nice assisted living communities back in Richmond, close to us, so we can visit more often. Elder care, at 62. After working 43 years, saving every penny, finally buying my dream home." "That's thoughtful of her," I said carefully. "She really cares about you, Mom. I know you two got off on the wrong foot, but she just wants what's best for the family. She says it's not healthy for someone your age to be isolated out there by the ocean. What if you fell? What if you had a medical emergency?" I'd been handling medical emergencies for 4 decades, but I didn't point that out. "She's also concerned about the financial burden," Randall continued. "Maintaining a house that size, the property taxes, the insurance. Wouldn't it be smarter to sell now while the market's good and use that money for your future care?" There it was. The real plan. Convince me I was too old, too fragile, too financially irresponsible to keep my own home. Pressure me to sell and move into some depressing facility while they took over my beautiful beach house. "Have you and Nova been looking at houses in the area?" I asked, keeping my voice light and curious. A pause. "What makes you ask that?" "Oh, just wondering. You seem to know a lot about the real estate market here. Nova might have looked at some listings online. You know how she is with research. But that's just, well, we thought maybe someday, when you're ready to make a change, we could help you find something more suitable. Maybe even move down here ourselves to be closer to you. Move down here, into my house, after pushing me into assisted living." "That's so sweet," I said, and I meant it. The sweetness was nauseating. "So you're okay with the reunion plan?" Nova's family is really excited to see the ocean. Some of them have never been to the beach. "Of course. When exactly are they arriving?" "Friday afternoon. Nova thought it would be easier if you were already settled in the cottage before they got there. Less confusing for everyone. Less opportunity for me to object in front of witnesses, more likely. And how long will they be staying?" Another pause. "Well, that's the thing. Patricia, Nova's mom, she's been having some health issues. Her doctor thought the sea air might be good for her, so they might stay a bit longer than usual, maybe through Thanksgiving. Nova thought you wouldn't mind, since you'll be moving back to the city anyway." Thanksgiving was 2 months away. "I see. You're being so great about this, Mom. Nova said you would be. She always said you were more reasonable than most mothers-in-law." Most mothers-in-law? I was being compared to other women Nova had manipulated and discarded. After I hung up, I sat in that shed for a long time, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The distance over the past 3 years, the comments about my age and health, the financial concerns. Nova hadn't just been isolating Randall from me, she'd been preparing him for this moment, training him to see me as a burden, a problem to be solved. And the solution was simple: take my house, warehouse me in some institutional setting, and live happily ever after on my dime. I thought about calling Randall back, confronting him with the real estate listings, demanding answers. But I'd spent enough years in crisis situations to know that panic led to mistakes. This required strategy. I gathered up the papers and walked back to my house, and spread them out on the kitchen table. Then I made a pot of coffee and really studied what I was dealing with. The financing calculations assumed a significant down payment. Where would that come from? The sale of my house, obviously. The mortgage applications were in both Randall's and Nova's names, but the income listed was inflated. They'd included projected rental income from investment properties. Investment properties, plural. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Nova had been busy on social media, posting in real estate investment groups about acquiring distressed properties from elderly family members and helping aging parents make smart financial decisions. One post made my blood boil. Sometimes you have to make the hard choices for people who can't see the big picture anymore. My MIL is sitting on a gold mine but doesn't understand the market. We're helping her transition to something more manageable while preserving the family wealth. Family wealth, my wealth, earned through decades of 12-hour shifts, saved penny by penny, invested carefully for my future. But the worst part was the comments. Other people sharing their own stories of helping elderly relatives out of valuable properties. Nova wasn't just stealing from me. She was part of a whole community of people who saw aging parents as assets to be liquidated. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, looking around at my beautiful kitchen with its sunny yellow curtains and the view of my roses blooming outside the window. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of, everything I'd finally achieved. And my own son was helping them take it away. But as the shock wore off, something else took its place. The same cold determination that had gotten me through medical school while working nights to pay for babysitters. The same steel spine that had faced down condescending doctors who thought a woman couldn't handle trauma cases. The same quiet strength that had raised a good man single-handedly, even if he'd forgotten what I'd taught him. Nova thought she was dealing with a helpless old woman who would roll over and accept whatever scraps they threw her way. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Margaret Chen, the best real estate attorney in 3 counties, and a former patient whose life I'd helped save during a complicated cardiac episode 10 years ago. Time to make some calls of my own. Margaret Chen arrived at my house within 2 hours of my call, her briefcase in one hand and a thermos of green tea in the other. She looked exactly the same as she had 10 years ago when I'd spent 3 sleepless nights monitoring her recovery, sharp-eyed, immaculately dressed, and radiating the kind of quiet competence that made me trust her immediately. "Doreen," she said, giving me a warm hug. "You look wonderful. Retirement agrees with you. Thank you for coming so quickly. After what you did for me and my family, I'd drive through a hurricane if you needed me." She looked around the house appreciatively. "This place is gorgeous. You've earned every bit of happiness here." We sat at my kitchen table and I spread out the papers I'd found. Margaret's expression grew darker as she read through Nova's real estate research and the social media posts I'd printed out. "This is fraud," she said finally. "They're planning to manipulate you into signing over property under false pretenses. The social media posts alone prove intent to defraud. But I haven't signed anything yet." "No, but they're creating a paper trail that makes you look incompetent. Look at this." She pointed to one of Nova's posts. "She's establishing a narrative that you're mentally declining, financially irresponsible, isolated, and vulnerable. If this went to court, they'd use these posts to argue that any decisions you made were the result of diminished capacity." My stomach clenched. Can they do that? They can try. Elder financial abuse is more common than people think, and it often involves family members who convince courts that they're acting in the victim's best interest. Margaret leaned back in her chair. "But here's the thing. They made a crucial mistake." "What's that?" "They assumed you'd be a passive victim. They didn't count on you fighting back or having allies." She smiled grimly. "Tell me, do you want to just protect yourself, or do you want to make sure they can't do this to anyone else?" The question hung in the air. Part of me just wanted this nightmare to end. to find a way to keep my house and my peace. But I thought about those social media posts, about Nova bragging to strangers about manipulating elderly family members. How many other families was she advising? How many other people like me were losing their homes because of her tactics? I want to stop them, I said quietly. Margaret nodded approvingly. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. Over the next 3 hours, we crafted a plan that was both elegant and devastating. The key was letting Nova think she was winning while we documented everything. First, Margaret helped me transfer my house into an irrevocable trust with myself as the primary beneficiary and trustee. The trust was structured so that I could live in the house for the rest of my life, but no one could force me to sell it or use it as collateral. Even if someone convinced a court I was incompetent, the trust would protect the property. This is bulletproof, Margaret explained as we signed the paperwork. Even if they somehow got power of attorney over you, they couldn't touch the house. And when you pass away, the property goes to whatever charity you designate, not to family members who manipulated you. Next, we set up surveillance. Margaret recommended a discreet security company that specialized in elder abuse cases. By Thursday morning, my house would be equipped with hidden cameras and audio recording devices. Everything Nova and her family said and did would be documented. But here's the beautiful part, Margaret continued. We're not just going to catch them in the act. We're going to let them incriminate themselves completely. The plan was simple, but required perfect timing. I would play along with their reunion charade, act like the confused, easily manipulated old woman they expected me to be. Let Nova and her family settle into my house, make themselves comfortable, start talking about their long-term plans. The cameras would capture everything: their casual cruelty, their discussions about selling my property, their celebration of what they thought was a successful con. The key is patience, Margaret warned. Don't confront them too early. Let them get comfortable. Let them say things they wouldn't say if they knew they were being recorded. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case. What about Randall? I asked. He's my son. I don't want to destroy him. Margaret's expression softened. That's your choice to make. But Doreen, you need to understand. If he's willingly participating in this scheme, he's already chosen to destroy his relationship with you. You're just deciding whether to let him get away with it. That night, I called Randall to confirm the arrangements for Friday. I made my voice sound tired, defeated. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him. About assisted living. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am too old to be rattling around in this big house by myself. The relief in his voice was unmistakable. Oh, Mom, I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. Nova found some really nice places. There's one called Sunset Manor that has activities and everything. You'd make friends. Sunset Manor. I'd looked it up after our last conversation. $4,800 a month for a studio apartment with communal dining and supervised activities. Like a very expensive prison. That sounds lovely, I lied. Maybe Nova could help me start looking at options while her family is here. She'd love that. She's already been researching the best way to prepare the house for sale. Did you know staging can increase the selling price by up to 20%? They weren't even pretending anymore. How thoughtful of her. She really is amazing, Mom. I'm lucky to have someone who cares so much about family. And after I hung up, I sat on my porch swing with whiskers on my lap, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. Tomorrow, my peaceful sanctuary would be invaded by people who saw it as nothing more than a commodity to be sold. My own son would walk through my door planning to steal my home and warehouse me in an institution. But I wasn't the same frightened woman who had taken that phone call 3 days ago. I was armed with legal protection, documented evidence, and a plan that would expose every lie Nova had told and every betrayal Randall had agreed to. Margaret had left me with one final piece of advice. Remember, you're not just fighting for your house. You're fighting for your dignity, your autonomy, and your right to live your life on your own terms. Don't let them make you feel guilty for refusing to be a victim. I wouldn't. I'd spent 43 years taking care of other people, putting their needs before my own, sacrificing my comfort for their well-being. I'd raised Randall to be honest, kind, and respectful. I'd worked myself to exhaustion to give him every opportunity. And if he'd chosen to repay that by trying to steal my home and destroy my independence, then he'd made his choice. Now it was time to make mine. Friday morning, I packed a small suitcase and moved my essential belongings to the tool shed. I left family photos on the tables, my reading glasses by my favorite chair, my coffee mug in the kitchen sink, everything to create the impression of a confused old woman who'd simply moved out without really understanding what was happening. Then I drove to the hotel 3 blocks away, where Margaret had booked me a suite overlooking the ocean. From there, I could monitor the cameras on my laptop while staying close enough to return quickly when the time came. Nova's family would arrive in a few hours, ready to celebrate their victory over the foolish old woman who'd let them steal her dream home. They had no idea the show was just beginning. I watched from my hotel room as the caravan of vehicles pulled into my driveway at exactly 3:30 Friday afternoon. 4 SUVs and a massive RV that barely fit in the space. Nova had apparently brought her entire extended family, just as promised. Through the laptop screen connected to my security cameras, I could see Nova step out of the lead vehicle like a conquering queen surveying her new domain. She was perfectly dressed in white linen pants and a flowing blue top that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Behind her came Randall, looking uncomfortable but obedient, and then a parade of relatives I'd never met. I recognized Patricia, Nova's mother, from her Facebook photos, a stern-faced woman in her 70s who moved with the imperious air of someone accustomed to getting her way. There were teenagers with their phones already out, taking selfies in front of my roses. There were adults hauling coolers and suitcases like they were moving in permanently, which, I realized with a sick feeling, they probably were. I watched Nova produce a key from her purse, my spare key, the one I'd given Randall years ago for emergencies. She opened my front door and gestured grandly for everyone to enter my house. "Welcome to paradise!" I heard her voice clearly through the audio system Margaret's security team had installed. "Isn't this place gorgeous? And Patricia, wait until you see the master bedroom. The ocean view is incredible. The master bedroom, my bedroom, where I'd spent peaceful mornings watching the sunrise over the water, where I'd planned to grow old surrounded by my books and memories, and whiskers purring on the windowsill. I watched Patricia walk through my living room, running her fingers over my furniture, examining my art like she was appraising it for auction. "This is lovely, dear. Much better than that cramped apartment your mother-in-law will be moving to." "Oh, she's not moving to an apartment," Nova laughed, settling onto my favorite chair, the blue velvet armchair I'd saved 6 months to buy. "We found this wonderful assisted living place. Very clean, very safe. She'll have people to take care of her and activities to keep her busy. It's really much better for someone her age." Someone her age. I was 62, not 92. Randall appeared on camera, looking around the house with an expression I couldn't read. Was it guilt? Regret? Or was he already calculating how much my furniture would bring at estate sale? "Where is Doreen?" Patricia asked. "I thought she'd be here to greet us." "Oh, she's staying in the cottage out back," Nova said airily. "We thought it would be less overwhelming for her. You know how elderly people can get anxious around crowds." Elderly people. Crowds. They were talking about me like I was a senile nursing home patient instead of a woman who'd been successfully managing trauma units until 3 months ago. "Should we go say hello?" one of the younger relatives asked. "Maybe later," Nova said quickly. "She's probably napping. Old people need lots of rest." Through the cameras, I watched them spread out through my house like an occupying army. Teenagers claimed the guest bedrooms I'd decorated so carefully. Adults opened my refrigerator and complained about the lack of beer. Patricia settled into my sunroom and announced that the wicker furniture would have to go. It was too casual for her taste. But it was the conversation in my kitchen that made my blood boil. Nova had gathered a small group around my breakfast table. Patricia, Randall, and a woman I later learned was Nova's sister, Diane. They spoke in hushed tones, but the microphones caught every word. "So the plan is working perfectly," Nova said, pulling papers from her oversized handbag. I've already contacted 3 real estate agents. The market is hot right now. We should be able to get at least 400,000, maybe more if we stage it right. 400,000. My house was worth at least 500,000, but they were already planning to undervalue it for a quick sale. What about Doreen? Diane asked. Won't she object? Nova laughed. Actually laughed. She's already mentally checking out. Did you see how confused she sounded on the phone? Classic early dementia. Randall's been documenting it for months, haven't you, honey? My son nodded. She repeats herself a lot, forgets conversations we've had. Last month, she called me 3 times in one day asking the same question. I had never called him 3 times in one day about anything. But I realized what he was doing, reframing normal phone calls as evidence of mental decline. The beauty of it is, she thinks this was all her idea. Nova continued. I've been planting seeds for months about how hard it must be to maintain such a big house, how worried we are about her safety. Now she's actually grateful that we're helping her make better decisions. Grateful for being robbed of my home and my independence. Patricia leaned forward. And you're sure the legal side is covered? Completely. Randall has power of attorney for health decisions, which we can extend to financial decisions once we establish mental incompetence. We've been building a paper trail. Missed appointments, confusion about bills, that sort of thing. Missed appointments I'd never made. Confusion about bills I'd been paying perfectly for 40 years. The assisted living place is already holding a spot, Randall added. $5,000 a month, but that's fine because the house sale will more than cover it. $5,000 a month. They were planning to warehouse me in an even more expensive prison than I'd thought. What about the cottage? Diane asked. Can you rent that out separately? Oh, we're tearing that down, Nova said dismissively. The lot will be worth more as expanded garden space. Plus, we don't want any reminders of this whole messy situation. Tearing down the cottage, erasing the last trace of my presence from my own property. I had to grip the edge of the hotel desk to keep from screaming. These people weren't just stealing my house. They were stealing my life, my identity, my future. And they were doing it while sitting in my kitchen, eating food from my refrigerator, planning my destruction like it was a business transaction. But the worst part was still coming. I have to admit, Patricia said, I was worried this might be complicated. Family can be so difficult about these things. Not this family, Nova replied smugly. Doreen's been isolated for years. No close friends, no other relatives who might interfere. She made it easy by cutting herself off from everyone when she moved here. I hadn't cut myself off. I'd been systematically isolated by Nova's manipulation, turned into a stranger in my own son's life. And Randall's been perfect, Nova continued, reaching over to squeeze my son's hand. It took some time to help him see that his mother's possessiveness wasn't healthy, but now he understands that this is what's best for everyone. Possessiveness. Wanting to have a relationship with my own child was possessiveness. Randall smiled at his wife's praise. It was hard at first. I mean, she's my mom. But Nova helped me realize that enabling her wasn't helping anyone. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions for people you love. Tough decisions. Like stealing their home and locking them away. I closed the laptop and walked to the hotel window, looking out at the ocean that I might never see from my own porch again. My hands were shaking with rage, but underneath the anger was something even worse. A deep, crushing sadness that my own son could sit in my kitchen and plan my destruction like it was an act of mercy. But I wasn't defeated yet. Nova and her family thought they were celebrating a victory, but they were actually providing me with evidence of their crime. Every word they'd spoken was recorded. Every lie they'd told was documented. Every plan they'd made was captured on video. Margaret had been right. Patience was key. Let them get comfortable. Let them say things they'd never say if they knew they were being recorded. And tomorrow, when they woke up expecting to continue their celebration of my destruction, I would be ready to show them exactly what happened when you tried to steal from someone who'd spent 40 years fighting for everything she had. They thought the game was over. They had no idea it was just beginning. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect coastal day that had made me fall in love with this place. I dressed carefully, not in the confused elderly woman costume I'd been wearing, but in my best navy suit, the one I'd worn to retirement ceremonies and important meetings. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a competent professional who'd built a life through hard work and smart decisions. Margaret arrived at my hotel at 8:30 sharp, accompanied by Detective Sarah Morrison from the county's Elder Abuse Unit and James Wright from the district attorney's office. We'd spent Friday evening reviewing the recorded evidence, and their faces had grown grimmer with each revelation. This is one of the most blatant cases of planned elder financial abuse I've ever seen, Detective Morrison had said. The premeditation, the systematic isolation, the deliberate creation of false incompetency narratives, it's textbook predatory behavior. Now, as we drove toward my house, I felt surprisingly calm. The rage had burned itself out overnight, leaving behind something cleaner and stronger. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting for every elderly person who'd been manipulated by family members who saw them as assets to be liquidated. Through the car window, I could see that Nova's family was already awake and enjoying their stolen paradise. Someone had set up a volleyball net on my carefully maintained lawn. Teenagers were sprawled on my porch furniture with their phones and energy drinks. The RV's awning was extended, creating an additional outdoor living space that blocked my ocean view. They'd made themselves completely at home. Remember, Margaret said as we pulled into the driveway, let them reveal themselves completely before we show our hand. The more they say, the stronger our case becomes. I nodded and walked toward my own front door, flanked by Margaret and Detective Morrison. James Wright hung back with the backup officers who'd arrived in an unmarked car. Nova answered my knock with a surprised smile that didn't reach her eyes. Doreen, what are you doing here? And dressed so fancy. I wanted to check on everyone, I said, keeping my voice mild and pleasant. Make sure you have everything you need. Oh, we're fine, she said, not inviting me in. Actually, this might be perfect timing. Patricia wanted to talk to you about some decisions we need to make. Decisions we need to make. About my house, my property, my life. I followed Nova into my own living room, where Patricia was holding court from my favorite chair like an empress receiving subjects. The entire family had gathered. 17 people crowded into my space, all of them looking at me with varying degrees of pity, condescension, or simple indifference. Doreen, dear, Patricia said in the patronizing tone people use with small children and the mentally impaired, we've been talking, and we think it's time to have an honest conversation about your future. My future? Sit down, sweetheart, Nova said, guiding me to a hard wooden chair while she settled comfortably on my sofa. We're all family here. We just want what's best for you. Randall stood near the window, avoiding my eyes. Behind him, I could see Margaret and Detective Morrison positioning themselves where they could observe through the glass. Now, Patricia continued, we've been looking around this house and frankly, we're concerned. It's far too much for someone your age to handle. The maintenance alone must be overwhelming. I manage fine, I said quietly. Oh, sweetheart, Nova laughed. You're not managing fine. Look at this place. When's the last time you had the gutters cleaned? The deck needs staining. The garden is overrun with weeds. My garden wasn't overrun with weeds. I'd spent hours tending those roses, those carefully planned flower beds. But I could see several family members nodding along with Nova's lies. The thing is, Patricia said, we've found you a wonderful solution. Sunset Manor is one of the finest assisted living facilities in the state. You'll have your own little apartment, 3 meals a day, activities, people to take care of you. And the best part, Nova added, is that selling this house will provide more than enough money to pay for it. You'll never have to worry about finances again. We've already spoken to some real estate agents, Randall said, finally speaking up. The market is really good right now. We could probably get $400,000, maybe more. $400,000 for a house worth at least $500,000. They weren't even pretending to get fair market value. That seems low, I said mildly. Oh, Doreen, Nova sighed. You have to be realistic. This place needs a lot of work before it could sell for top dollar. It's better to price it to move quickly. After all, every month you keep it, you're losing money on maintenance and taxes. And frankly, Patricia added, You're not competent to handle a transaction this complex. That's why Randall will take care of everything for you. He has power of attorney. Actually, I said, standing up slowly, he doesn't. The room went quiet. Nova's smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? Randall asked. I mean, you have power of attorney for healthcare decisions only, and only if I'm incapacitated. I'm not incapacitated, and this isn't a healthcare decision. Nova's laugh sounded forced. Doreen, sweetie, you're being silly. Of course Randall can help you with financial decisions. You're clearly not thinking straight. Actually, I said, pulling my phone from my purse, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. I pressed a button, and suddenly my voice filled the room, the conversation from yesterday, playing back through hidden speakers Margaret's team had installed. The beauty of it is, she thinks this was all her idea. I've been planting seeds for months about how hard it must be to maintain such a big house, how worried we are about her safety. Now she's actually grateful that we're helping her make better decisions. Nova's face went white. Patricia's mouth fell open. Around the room, confused murmurs started as family members realized what they were hearing. What is this? Nova demanded. This is the truth, I said calmly. The truth about how you've been manipulating my son, lying about my mental state, and planning to steal my house. Randall stepped forward, his face confused and angry. Mom, what are you doing? This is crazy behavior. You're proving that you need help. Am I? I asked. Detective Morrison, would you like to come in? The front door opened, and Detective Morrison stepped inside, her badge clearly visible. Behind her came Margaret, James Wright, and two uniformed officers, Nova Hartwell and Randall Hartwell. Detective Morrison said, You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse and fraud. The room erupted. Patricia started screaming about harassment. Several family members bolted for the doors, only to find more officers waiting outside. Nova turned on me with pure venom in her eyes. You bitter old witch, she shrieked. You've ruined everything. Randall, tell them this is crazy. But Randall was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Mom, I don't understand. We were trying to help you. Were you? I asked quietly. Is that why you lied about me having dementia? Is that why Nova was already picking out furniture to replace mine? Is that why you were planning to sell my house for $100,000 less than it's worth? The fight went out of him all at once. For a moment, he looked like the little boy I'd raised, confused and frightened and lost. She said, Nova said you were getting sick, that you needed help but were too proud to ask for it, and you believed her instead of talking to me directly. Detective Morrison was reading Nova her rights, while the other officers cleared the house of family members who weren't involved in the scheme. Margaret stood beside me, a protective presence as my world turned upside down. The house is protected, Margaret told me quietly. The trust is ironclad. Even if they'd succeeded in getting you declared incompetent, they couldn't have touched it. I watched as they led Nova away in handcuffs, still screaming about injustice and misunderstanding. Randall went quietly, looking back at me once with an expression I couldn't read. By noon, my house was quiet again. The volleyball net was gone. The RV was towed. The invasion was over. I stood on my porch with whiskers in my arms, looking out at my roses, my ocean, my beautiful sanctuary that was truly mine again. Margaret sat beside me on the porch swing. How are you feeling? Free, I said, and meant it. For the first time in 3 years, I feel completely free. The DA thinks they'll take plea deals, she said. Nova's looking at serious time for elder abuse conspiracy. Randall, well, that depends on how much he can prove he was manipulated versus how much he was a willing participant. I thought about my son, the baby I'd rocked through countless nights, the boy I'd cheered at every baseball game, the young man I'd been so proud to see graduate and succeed. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost him to a woman who saw people as things to be used. I hope he can find his way back to who he used to be, I said. But that's his choice to make. 6 months later, I received a letter from Randall. He was in counseling, trying to understand how he'd let Nova manipulate him into betraying everything I'd taught him about love and family. The letter was full of apologies and regrets, but also something else, a growing understanding of what he'd lost when he let Nova poison his relationship with me. I wrote back, not to forgive him immediately, not to pretend the damage could be erased, but to leave the door open for the long work of rebuilding trust. Nova took a plea deal and was sentenced to 3 years for elder abuse conspiracy. She tried to claim she'd been acting in my best interests, but the recorded evidence made that impossible. The judge, a woman in her 60s herself, was particularly harsh about family members who preyed on elderly relatives. As for me, I planted new roses that spring, ones that Nova had never touched, never planned to tear out, never seen as obstacles to her vision of my property. I adopted another cat, a young orange tabby I named Hope, and every morning I sat on my porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise over the ocean I'd earned through 43 years of hard work and smart choices. I'd learned something important through this ordeal. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes the people who truly love you are the ones who stand with you when the people who should protect you are trying to tear you down. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to fight for the life you've built, no matter who tries to take it away. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.